Okay, this is Mario once again with MIA Microflight, and this is a layout on CAD that I've been working on for the micro racers, or the turbo racers rather. So as you can see, this is a layout that's done on a 4x8 foot piece of plywood, or it could be a table. In my case, I'm going to make this a plywood, but it's going to be raised so that I can have access to the inside, make it like a box, so that I have access to the electronics inside. And this is just for now, it's just a makeshift control panel here. This will probably have some potentiometers and LEDs and switches, so I can turn on and vary the current voltage to various devices here. Recently I showed a video where I am showing this tower right here. This is a tower that the way this started, let me start there, is I wanted a racetrack that was not too mechanical and not too organic, if that makes sense. Organic being by hand, and not too mechanical means not too computerized. And so I wanted to blend both of those features into a layout, and that's how I got into this design here. As you can see, there's a sort of a lake here, and there's what would be a little mountain here, and then this is done really quick, just in profiles and extrusions, just to make it quick. But once I get the design going, I typically like to, for instance, take this tower. I started with just some boxy items, and then I started working it into a little more, into a more realistic shape. This was not meant to have this helicopter pad here, and if you saw my video, of the real thing, you can see that these are LED lights that are triggered by a little circuit that I built, with the timer. Actually, it's a counter with a little timing circuits there. It's just some flip flops, to turn on the LEDs in a time sequence with a little bit of a delay and an abrupt decay time, so it flashes on and off, typically, of what you would see in FAA towers and things that are in buildings and structures that require lighting, for FAA purposes. Those lights those beacons need to be on in order to in order for aircraft to see, and it's just a requirement, by the Federal Aviation Administration. And there are some guidelines, if you really want to get into that, to the nitty gritty, you can spend a lot of time, finding out what those guidelines are. But this is more for fun, and so it does not need to remain to strict rules. And so I like to work more from a freestyle point of view, and whatever's in my mind, I put it down, and then from there I just keep massaging, and so that's how this track started to grow, from the basic shape that I show in my very first video that I showed of this track. So this tower is actually a second iteration. As you can see here, this was my first tower, and you can see just basic shapes that I started with. But when you start to print and you start to consider how you're going to print these things so that they're easy to assemble and they're logical in a way that you can assemble these and access things, such as the inside here. This frame, for example, is a good example here. This frame here, this part right here that you see here, this gray section is separate than this border outline here, or perimeter. I had to do this part separately, because this part, the gray part, needs to insert into this box here, which this hexagonal box, which makes up the tower, which would be the control tower, for in this case for this racetrack. And so in order for that part to sit inside that part, I had to put I have to offset and put sort of make it like a shoulder, or a peg insert into this part right here. So the gray part inserts into that with a little bit of inside step, and then this outer portion had to be done separately as a separate piece so that it would wrap around this section here. I could have done it that and that part together, but the fact that this part needed to have an inner step, when you go print this, I don't want to create supports, for these areas here, and this is where you need to be careful here, and give it a little more thought on how you're going to print this so that these parts come out clean. I wanted this edge to come out clean, and so this part here is done separately, as I'm going to show you here on my on some of these layouts here. There we go. And so these are the parts. So you can see here this part is inverted, and this is the step that I was talking about, how this has to insert into that cavity here. This is a separate cavity. So if I were to break this part right here, you can see that. I'll just put it right there. You can see how these parts are broken down. Let me move this part over here because this is all part of this group here. And so that's printed separately, as you see it here. I did build this with supports here through Cura, and it came out super clean. My original did not have this angle here. I actually angled this a little bit further outward, so that I have a little more. It has a little more appeal than this section right here. This was the first one that I did right here, and as you can see, that tower actually I didn't have the proper orientation on some of these faces, and so when you have that in CAD and you go to print without realizing that, it actually sealed this section here, which is something that it was not part of the design here. I didn't want it, but in Cura, it tells you that, but just an oversight. So I ended up redoing this one right here for this better one right here with a little more angle sides of these this lookout section here, which would be the windows. And so I decided to do this separately. These are the frame inserts for the windows. This is actually going to be assembled with a plastic clear sheet from behind. So I did not have that in my model that I showed in my other video where I showed it with the lights flickering, because I'm waiting for some CA glue to come in so that I can assemble these with the clear windows, as is my building here that I also did with the lighting. And so this actually is this is actually the building here. As you can see, I have these panels here which make up the walls of the building. The roof is separate, and then the framing. This one does not have the framing here because I actually lost that part when I was saving one of these files. I actually lost that, but I actually printed that already, so it's just a matter of me recreating that on this model here. But this one also, it's the same thing, same thing done. This roof inserts into that. This has openings, for these towers here, so that it inserts right into them. Actually, this is the old one, but if we look at the these are the components here, and as you can see how all this is built and done. The frame is separate, the walls are separate, and then it's got these perforations here so that I can screw this side here into that. I could have made this with a little more thought into the actual inside of these frames, but I wanted to print this flat, and as you can see, this part is flat. This goes on the table. The bottom section is what you're seeing here, and then this gets printed at this is the top, which comes out really clean. And so I did not mind having these little holes here for these countersunk tiny little screws that I use to assemble this building. And so, but I just wanted to give my viewers an idea of how this is done, for those of you that are not familiar with CAD construction and CAD modeling. And these are very simple structures. As you can see here, it's just squarish frames. There's nothing organic about this. This would be a little more organic here in a sense, but even this is more mechanical because there's no There are no really complex three-dimensional curves and surfaces here, as would be like a real rock or a tree or something, of that nature. And so I tend to work more with, from a mechanical standpoint, and then I tweak my models, if they need to have that organic feel when they need to. These are just structures, buildings, and so they're very easy to do. Once you get familiar with the CAD program, and you start playing around with these. It's basically just a bunch of extrusions, profiles on extrusions. So it makes it really simple here. Offsets, extrusions, profiles, and so these right here, these windows, or the frames, as you can see, I even did the windows, and this was printed in clear in some of my I did do some clear windows, but the problem is with this clear material that I have, it started to fog the view towards the inside of the building, and so I didn't want to do that, so I decided just to go with a plastic sheet behind it. That's the easiest way to do that. I could vacuum form these parts with a mold, with a similar mold to this, so that it forms the offsets and the steps here for the windows, but that's really going an unnecessary mile. You can see how this is also offset here, and this is where this clear window assembly was supposed to fit into, but I decided to bypass that, and what I did instead is, on my actual building, I actually left this framing as you see it here. I just reversed the hide that. Okay, like that, so you can see this offset at the front of the building, which looks a little better here. Let me do that on this there we go. And you can see the offset right there, and then the clear of the window would be behind it. So that's how I decided to do the my buildings. You can see how much more three-dimensionality it has, when you do this. And so like this window right here, you can see that right here, the offsets right there, and then the window would be, I don't have the windows here, but it would be behind this frame here. So that looks a lot better and a little more realistic, I think, than just a flat frame surface there. So same thing with these side windows and the doors here. They all have frames in red, and what I'm about to do on the buildings that you see here, I started with these buildings here, just some basic structures once again, just to provide a little more interest in this area here. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do here. And even though this was supposed to be a track, that you would find in a like in places where they just have the racetrack, I decided to blend it in with sort of a city landscape here. I know this tower looks more like a control tower for an airfield, but I think it could apply, for a racetrack like this, and I think you could have buildings in a racetrack like that, if it's somewhere near an industrial park or something like that. And so that's how I approach this. I mean, anything goes here. The point is not to. My point right here was not to make it realistic, to any particular place, but just to let the mind go with whatever it looks good and it looks fun and it looks interesting. And so to me, this track is beginning to look a lot more interesting with all these little details that I've been adding here. I also have this what would be a canopy here. I don't know if I'm going to extend this maybe 3 times the length here, and put it somewhere in here in the center here of this long run. I think that would be interesting. I started playing around with some different shaped canopies, something like that. Also, that's supposed to be clear. And so I'm going to be massaging this, but the basic idea is there, and that's how I like to start. When I approach these things, is it's better to just put a lot of sketches or basic ideas on the model or on the side, and then come back to it and start massaging those things and working, and that's how you refine these things. But anyway, getting back to the construction of the buildings, you have an idea how I started to approach all these things here, and they have to be done in sections and in parts like that, so that it looks good, it prints good, and it mechanically is able to be assembled nice and easy. Like I was saying, this tower section right here, this part right here has this lip here, and this is offset. The lips is offset with a certain tolerance, so that when I print and take into consideration the shrink ratios that when you do 3D printing, I have an offset for that other part of about 0.01 millimeter in as an offset here, just for clearance and tolerance, so that it fits, so that the parts are able to fit nice and snug in there, not too tight, not too loose, but nice and snug, where they retain themselves when you assemble these things, or when I assemble these things. Same thing here with the lettering here. This lettering is done in white, and this is done in a gray, just like the 3D, the actual part that I showed. So I had to go get this actual part here, just to so that this video makes a little more sense in what I'm saying here. What was I saying? I was saying that and so I still have to do these windows here, because the windows that I printed were for another shape. I don't have it here, but these are a little bit more. They're a little more defined on an angle, and you can see once again the framing here, how that offset really shows really nice here on the framing here, and then the actual plastic will be behind there. This will be clear, so that even though in the model it looks like it's done in a sort of a blue tint, I could do it in a blue tint plastic, but I think clear is going to be it's going to be required here, so that we can see inside. Well, there's I could put little miniature people, I guess, inside, just to give it a little more realism. But I think if I just put a light inside, this one does not have a light, but it does have the flashing beacon LEDs on the helipad, which is at the top of this roof here. And as you can see here, this is what I was talking about, the actual frame here. So this assembles on top of that, and it's like I was saying, the tolerances are quite very nice and tight. This is there permanently, not permanently, but it's nice and snug inside this here via this step here, and then this part just fits right on top of that, also nice and clean, nice and snug. And so it takes a little trial and error, just to get the tolerance right when you work with CAD, and just depending on what type of not resins, but plastics, PLA filaments you use. They can have slightly different shrink ratios. Some shrink more than others, and you just have to play around with the design until you just get it right. And so this is my tower. You can see the wires coming out from here. Those wires that you see right through it, they'll be a little bit more cleaned up once I get my my adhesives that I order. This will probably come in through here, through the side, maybe just hot glued, and just run down. I still have to put maybe one or a couple little LEDs on the roof underneath here, just to create the illusion that this is lit up from the inside as well. When the lights are off, and this is run, with the lights off, and all the lighting here is turned on here. You can see all the lights these little lights that I've been working on. This is basically aluminum, 1/8 aluminum tubing with 3D printed lamps, and these they took me a little while. I was going to do the conventional lamps that everybody and their mother does, with the more oblong and elongated, oval rather like. But I decided to like on this one right here, because that's my own. I didn't want to copy, what's out there, and I forced myself not to do that. I could do that. I could download things that are already done, but I like creating things out from scratch, so that when I show these things, you'll see it for the first time, and it's even though people have created buildings, people have created tracks, people have created 3D printed borders and things like that. My stuff is really it's from the bottom up, from scratch, with my own ideas and with my own purposes. And as you can see, there's a lot of logic also involved in making all these things here, because I wanted the track. Well, right here, for example, I started with these separate pieces as little blocks here, which allows for any kind of curve here. You're not locked to any in particular radius, size. You can do this whichever way you want to with the separate blocks. But I also opted to do stuff like this, with these types of tracks, which are done in these are done in different radiuses. This one, for example, it has a radius of right here are the dimensions here, how I came up with these outer and inner track elements here, as you can see. And I did this and I still have to do a smaller one here. And this was to be able to speed up the process here and not use so many blocks here in these curves here. But I'm still using some blocks, to connect the straights, with some of the curves, and to do a little more fine tuning of some of these curves, which are some of these curves are a little bit tight here. But I was being very careful not to make it too tight. I was a little bit concerned here in this particular section coming out of this or going under this underpass here, because you don't want too tight of a turn here, that it makes it hard for the little car to steer. I mean, the cars, you can turn them down in terms of speed. 20, 50, and 100% is the setting on those controllers, which makes those cars really, really nice, to operate. But you also don't want things to be too tight where it makes it difficult to operate it, even at the lowest speed setting. But anyway, so that's how this track is done. And I was very careful also on the proportions and the distances. I wanted to have this really wide curve here. I want to have a wide curve, some very challenging corners here. This is a little challenging here. This curve right here. Let me put this tower away here and get my pointer here. So this right here is a little more challenging because it's a tight radius, and then it goes into another radius. Then this is not so challenging, but I wanted to come in with enough area here before it goes into another little tight curve here, which is another challenge here. Once you get going through here, it's just straight out. It comes back, a nice wide turn, comes back, a nice long stretch here, and then it encounters another challenge here, which another little tight radius here. They're not really tight, but because this is a 6-inch track. As you can see, the cars, I modeled the cars really quick. They're just boxy looking cars, but they're in the right proportions. This track can hold up to 3-4 cars comfortably, without getting too tight side by side. And 6-inch wide track. I don't know what other tracks are. I've seen so many tracks before I started building my own. Not to try to do the same thing as other people are doing, but mainly to get an idea of where the mind was at of the author of those tracks. And I've seen so many tracks, but nobody talks about dimensions. Nobody talks about the details as I am talking in this video here. And I don't do it because people are asking me. I just do it because I think it's informative. If somebody were to, if I were to stumble on a video and somebody would say, this is the way I approach things. For me, that's interesting. For other people, it may not be. But I'm sort of on the geek SWAT when it comes to those things. I like details. I like facts. I like data. I like to measure things. I like to weigh things. I like to, I like to know the reasons why. You just don't do things for the hell of it. There's a process. There's a method. There's a right way. There's a wrong way, and sometimes there's no right or wrong way. You just go with it, and whatever seems to work works, as long as it fits within the concept of that idea or logic. Anyway, so as far as the track and the elements are concerned, that's as far as the track components here. But getting back to the buildings here, and I started, like I said, with this area here, and I wanted to see what would look good here. So I mean, in here in Arizona, if you go to Tempe Lake, my wife said, are you trying to make this like a Tempe Lake in Arizona? And I didn't even think about that, but maybe it was in my subconscious that there's a lot of glass buildings that have been built by the lake. It's a man-made lake. It's called Tempe Lake in Arizona. Here, if you're from Arizona, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And there are areas that are built with buildings kind of similar to this. I'm not trying to mimic those buildings. It was, let's start with the square and let's see what if I can extract this section. Let's cut it in half, 1/3, and so on. And that's how this particular building, kind of was born. And then from there, I said, well, let me do it. What would look good here? Now let's put a rectangular here. And then I started with this hexagon here. And I said, well, let's make a hexagon building, and then let's connect this one to that one with a sort of like a tunnel here, like a clear glass tunnel. And so that's how this section grew. And then my wife reminded me that it looks sort of like Tempe Lake. As far as the buildings are concerned, I guess, because they're glass, they look glass, but they won't be so glassy once I start doing this, what I've already done. I've already started to do the framing here, and this is how I build my models. I start with basic shapes, basic ideas there, which gives you a good indication of how how the elements that are going to be 3D printed are going to turn up. And so I've been working on the framing here, and as you can see here, I have been adding the framing because I'm about to create these panels here. So this will be one panel, actually, basically like the same as my little building here, where where the cars are supposed to go in. This is going to be all the side panels are going to be separate. They will be printed as just the frames here. So all this will be framed in white PLA. What you're looking here, and I'm about to just give you an idea how I approach these things. I actually have all that geometry already there, so I'm just removing some lines that are not supposed to be here, but they were there because I needed to establish, the basic structure and an idea of the sections, the floors, what would be the floors. And so I'm about to I'm just basically cleaning it up so that I can start extruding this to a certain thickness. Most of the frames that I've been printing are at done at 50 thousandths basically in thickness, which allows for a nice scale. Like I said, I like to work in freestyle when I do these things. I mean, I've done architectural models, to the very very tight tolerance scale models. I've done that during my professional work. When I branched out from engineering, I used to be an engineer for a major communications company in Chicago, and so I decided to, I reached the point where it wasn't fun anymore. It was great, out of school, but I wanted to do my own thing, and so doing the radio control, that's how I started in my Microflight, because a long time ago I wanted to have a little company that I could do the cool stuff that I could not find anywhere as much as I searched. I wanted to do models that nobody was doing. That's where the ultralights, microlights, beginning with the tiny little helicopters. When I started that, I started at a time when nobody had these little tiny 4 ounce, for God's sake, 12-inch rotor helicopters. And then from there I went to the palm size helicopters, and from there I figured that when that dried up, that I was going to bring my ultralights, which I did back in the 80s. I had ultralights and microlights, and that was my thing. That was my that was sort of my world. Excuse me. Back in the 70s, 80s, I was heavy into microlights and ultralights, especially at the time that the hang gliders took off. Here in the States and in Europe. I was really heavy into that area of aircraft, and so from there it stemmed into these radio control models, that I had back in those years. Except that I was more into uh, finding a way to develop this little tiny helicopter, and I did that back in the '80s, and then in the 2000s I released my the some of the world's first micro helicopters before any companies were able to release these micro helicopters. So I did the micro, the sub micro, and the palm size categories. And if you look through the internet, you'll find my name somewhere embedded in there. Um, and so that's how that got started. And when I was doing that, I actually was freelancing, doing some architectural models for companies. I did that for a while. I worked for Revell Monogram for a while. I also worked for a company in Niles in Chicago that does collectible models. I was a product developer there for a year, and then I went to work for another company that hired me to do 3D models on one of the first SLA machines. Um, and the fact that I had worked on cellular phones before, they kind of hired me on the spot. My boss had a lot of faith in me, and I remember my boss. For hiring me, putting a lot of faith in me in an area that was very new to me. 3D printing was very, very new, and I was a little bit uneasy uh, um, uh, going into that particular job when he hired me. But he put a lot of faith. He said, I know you can do it. I've seen your resume. I've seen the stuff that you've done. By that time, I had already established MIA Designs, which was just a little company that I was doing kind of freelance stuff, and kind of trying to branch into my MIA Microflight. So MIA Designs is was the launching pad of MIA Microflight, and that's why I keep MIA Designs as my email. When you go in my email, it says, some people ask me, how come your email is not MIA Microflight? Well, it's MIA Designs because that's how I got started. It was MIA Designs, and still is. I have not, gotten rid of that name or sold that name to anybody. So it's MIA Designs, and then went into MIA Microflight. And so I did a lot of stuff. I did electrical work as a freelancer. I did, oh my God, what haven't I done? But mainly models. I mean, the companies they hire me because I could do modeling in a much simpler and creative and cheaper way than a lot of these companies that they were hiring. I mean, I remember one company that I went to work for, and they hired me as a product developer there. They didn't know me. I came with my portfolio of which was not really 3D modeling, but it was these are some of the models that I've done for fun. And so they asked me to create a set of lights for these little tiny buildings, porcelain buildings, and they also asked me if I could drill, through porcelain. I at that point I never had drilled through porcelain, but my eagerness to not to say no, I said yes, and I almost got into trouble because I had promised the company that I could drill, and so I decided to find out. This is a time when there was no internet, so I had to do everything by the hard way. It just talked to a lot of people, and I found out that you could drill through porcelain with the right bits. They were very expensive. I ended up buying a few bits, breaking a few bits in the process, spending